Imagine a world where Marvel Spider Man, is an Xbox exclusive. Now, is this something that's actually going to happen, or is it something that can happen? Well, it's something that could have actually happened, and the story actually broke over the weekend, and I found it to be a very fascinating story. And I'm sure a lot of people will also agree with me that it's an interesting story, but also I want to kind of give my take on this as well. So, first thing we're going to get into is the actual story about this, because I saw everybody talking about it and saying, Microsoft turned down this game and Microsoft had the opportunity to make Spider Man exclusive. And my whole thought process was, well, if you just look at the story and the timeline for Microsoft, they weren't in the process of building things, they were in the process of tearing things down and weren't even sure if they were going to continue making consoles and continue making games that came around that time. They had about 5 or 6 studios at that particular time, and I'll get into it right now. So this was very interesting. The head of Marvel Games has revealed how Xbox turned down an opportunity to make licensed games shortly before Sony made the deal to make Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4. So it really kind of dispels a couple of myths, and one of those myths is that Sony paid to keep a game off of Xbox. This clearly wasn't the case from what we can tell right here. So in an excerpt from Stephen L. Kent's 2021 book, The Ultimate History of Video Games Volume 2, Executive Vice President and Head of Marvel Games, Jay Ong, explains how the company cut its earlier deal with Activision short in search of a better partnership. According to him, Marvel Games wasn't happy with the quality of Spider-Man games being published by Activision, and the two companies mutually agreed to terminate their licensing deal early. Ong said that the deal that they made to walk away when Activision asked, "What are you going to do with the IP after you get it back?" To which Ong replied, "I'm going to find a better home for it." According to Ong, Activision's reply was, "Good luck finding your unicorn." Ong said Marvel Games then went to Xbox and PlayStation to see if either of them would be interested in forming an exclusive partnership, asking them, "We don't have any big console deals with anyone right now. What would you like to do?" And Microsoft's strategy, according to Ong, was to focus on its own IP, and as such it decided to pass on the offer. Sony, however, was much more receptive. He sat down with these two executives from PlayStation's third party, Adam Boyes and John Drake, in August of 2014 in a conference room in Burbank. I said, "We have a dream that this is possible, that we could beat the Arkham games and have one game at least and maybe multiple games that could drive adoption of your platform." Sony reportedly responded by offering to make a AAA PlayStation exclusive Spider-Man game and handed the game to Insomniac Games, which was independent at that time but was considered one of Sony's most important partners. The resulting game, Marvel Spider-Man, was widely critically acclaimed and reportedly went on to sell more than 20 million copies, with its spin-off Miles Morales selling more than 6.5 million copies. In the US, Spider-Man is now one of Sony's most successful video game releases ever in terms of dollar sales. Insomniac recently announced Spider-Man 2 with a teaser trailer during a PlayStation Showcase presentation of September of 2021. It's also expanding its relationship with Marvel in an in-development Wolverine game. The Spider-Man sequel is due to release on PlayStation 5 in 2023, with Candyman actor Tony Todd playing Venom. So, again, we get a lot of interesting little bits and pieces right here. First of all, a lot of people are like, dang, Microsoft should have done this, Microsoft should have done this. I get that Insomniac wasn't a first-party studio for Sony, but they were still super close to Sony and probably the closest thing to a second party that you could get. So I think that, people go, well, Microsoft could have got Insomniac to do that. I don't think that they had the relationship that Sony had with Insomniac Games. The second thing that I would like to say is you have to look at the era, okay? If we look at the games that were licensed at that particular time, there weren't a lot of good ones, especially around Marvel games, right? So Sega did Iron Man 1 and 2, which neither one of those games are very good. You had Activision doing Spider-Man games, which were kind of mediocre and weren't very well received. Not saying that people didn't like some of them, but I'm just saying in general, they weren't very well received. You also had a Thor game that was absolutely terrible. You also had a Captain America game that was pretty mid. If you think about it, there was some Incredible Hulk games. When it comes to these licenses and things, we just weren't seeing a lot of games that were very good in terms of what they actually had to offer from the license themselves. Now, if Microsoft would have accepted, we probably wouldn't have gotten the game that we got, which would have been disappointing to me and I'm sure to a lot of other people. And it probably would have carried on this terrible tradition of, Microsoft and putting out lackluster games, and also would have continued through the tradition of just licensed games not being very good. That's a very, very bad thing, right? I think that one of the things that makes Insomniac games, Spider-Man games, something special is the fact that they did it right, and it kind of reinvigorated the quality aspect of these type of games. Superhero games used to be pretty much all bad. I mean, Arkham games really changed that as well, but at the end of the day, what have we got outside of like some Lego games that were actually worthwhile and that people wanted to play? I think that that's something that people don't understand when it comes to stuff like this, right? So yes, Microsoft could have done it, and Microsoft turned it down to focus on their own stuff. We know they had a lot of things going on at that particular time. I'm actually personally glad that they turned it down, because we wouldn't have gotten the game that we got had that had been the case. Now, since then, people go, oh, well, it's easy to pick on Microsoft because, they haven't really put out anything since, the Forza and Halo. But the thing that I would kind of point out is they were right to focus on their own stuff and to sort of turn things around the way that they have. And now they are open to doing license deals, because we know that they have Indiana Jones, and we also know that, well, heavily rumored that they have one, possibly two Star Wars games ready for production. So I think that we are going to possibly see some things like that from them, in addition to their own IP and things like that. So it's like Microsoft is often damned if they do, damned if they don't, and it's really a bad place to be in if you think about it. I feel like Microsoft can never win for for losing. You know what I mean? Like, people just, for some reason, absolutely hate Microsoft and Xbox for some reason. I don't particularly understand it. I can understand the disappointment with the game situation, but overall, I feel like a lot of what people do is just hate blindly on Microsoft and look for any reason to kind of be pissed off at them, and I used to do that too, but I'm so thankful that I'm not like that anymore, and that, I've kind of turned things around with how I feel about video games and things like that. So I do think that, Microsoft has a long way to go still. They have to get that kind of stigma, that negative stigma out, because people do look at them and they look at what they have to offer and they go, hey, Microsoft hasn't done a good job at, delivering the first party content. And I think that's a very accurate take, and that's something that Microsoft needs to fix, like, sooner rather than later, and it's a real problem. So yeah, what could have been, they could have had an exclusive Spider-Man game. Would it have been the Spider-Man game that we got? Probably not, and it probably would have been a huge disappointment for all involved. So, with that being said, I'm happy with things the way that they went. Sony and Insomniac came together to put out that huge game. It was the right move. Microsoft can, look back. They turned down GTA back in the day, so it really just kind of is par for the course. I don't look at that as a negative. I look at it as something that really could happen to anybody. So, we'll see what happens. I think that it's going to be interesting to see just how far along things are. But, I think that this is an instance where I look at what Microsoft did and say, hey, I'm glad they did that. And that's speaking as an Xbox fan, because I think Sony killed it with Spider-Man and Miles Morales, and I'm super excited for part 2, and we'll see what happens after that. But yeah, it's very interesting to always look back and say, hey, what if this or what if that? So we'll see what happens. But I'd love to hear your guys' take on this. It's a very interesting topic. Please let me know what you think down below or on social media. If you did and watched the video and you enjoy the video, please leave a like on it. It helps it to be seen, and it helps the channel to grow. Thank you guys so much for rocking out with me. Have a great day. Rack 'em up, fact 'em up, crap gamer 'em up, crap gamer out.